The interstellar envoy stepped carefully onto Earth's soil, his long, spindly limbs moving with a grace that belied the tension coiling through his body. His kind were not prone to fear, but this mission had been fraught with uncertainty from the beginning. The Galactic Council had deemed it crucial to establish diplomatic ties with humanity, a species infamous for their unpredictable nature. He had reviewed the briefings, studied the cultural nuances, and prepared for hostility. What he had not prepared for was the warmth of their welcome. The landing site was a modest clearing, flanked by rolling green fields and a sky so blue it seemed unreal. The humans, standing a respectful distance away, wore expressions that ranged from cautious curiosity to nervous smiles. It was their leader who stepped forward first, a stout, middle-aged man with a weathered face and a demeanor that radiated calm authority. He spoke in their native tongue, but the diplomat's universal translator rendered the words flawlessly. "Welcome to Earth," the man said, extending a hand. "We hope your journey was smooth." The gesture was unexpected. In his culture, physical contact between strangers was rare and often considered intrusive. Hesitantly, the diplomat extended one of his appendages, allowing the human's hand to clasp it. The warmth and firmness of the grip startled him, as did the sincerity in the man's gaze. "I am pleased to make your acquaintance," the diplomat replied, his voice a series of melodic clicks that the translator smoothed into human speech. "Your hospitality is appreciated." The human leader smiled, a strange, tooth-baring expression that would have been considered a threat among many species, but seemed to carry no malice here. "We've prepared a place for you to rest. I imagine you must be tired after such a long journey." Tired? The diplomat processed the concept. Rest was not a necessity for his species in the same way it was for humans, but he recognized the gesture as an offering of goodwill. "That is considerate of you," he said, inclining his elongated head. What followed was a series of interactions that left the diplomat increasingly bewildered. A group of humans approached, bearing trays of what he assumed were offerings. The scents were unfamiliar, but the humans' faces were alight with anticipation, as if eager to share something important. A young woman stepped forward, holding a bowl filled with a steaming liquid. She demonstrated how to consume it, sipping carefully before extending it toward him. "Soup," she said, her voice gentle. The diplomat hesitated. His physiology was vastly different from theirs, and consuming alien substances was risky. Yet their earnest expressions suggested this was not a mere ritual, it was an act of trust. Carefully, he accepted the bowl, dipping one of his feeding appendages into the liquid. The taste was complex, warm, unlike anything he had ever encountered. The humans erupted into applause, startling him. Had he done something wrong? The young woman laughed softly. "It's good, right?" she asked, her tone encouraging. "It is." "Unexpected," the diplomat admitted, eliciting more laughter. They seemed delighted, as though his simple act of acceptance had bridged some unseen divide. As the day wore on, the diplomat found himself the subject of endless questions. The humans wanted to know everything about his species, his world, his reasons for visiting. Their curiosity was unrelenting, yet it lacked the edge of suspicion he had anticipated. Instead, they seemed genuinely eager to understand. At one point, a child approached, clutching a small, colorful object. The diplomat recognized it as a toy, though its purpose was unclear. The child held it out to him, eyes wide with wonder. Tentatively, the diplomat accepted it, turning it over in his appendages. The child giggled, clapping her hands, and the humans around them exchanged amused glances. "She's offering you a gift," someone explained. "It's a sign of friendship." Friendship. The concept was not foreign to the diplomat, but he had never experienced it in such an immediate, tangible way. Among his own kind, relationships were built on mutual benefit and logical alliances. This was different. There was no calculation here, no hidden agenda, just an unspoken invitation to connect. As night fell, the humans lit a fire, its flickering glow casting long shadows across the clearing. They sat together in a circle, their faces illuminated by the warm light. One of them produced an instrument, its gentle notes weaving through the air like a story unfolding. Others began to sing, their voices rising and falling in harmony. The diplomat watched, mesmerized. His species valued logic and precision, and such displays of raw emotion were rare. Yet here, among these humans, it seemed as natural as breathing. He felt something stir within him, a faint, unfamiliar warmth that he could not quite name. But the tranquility was short-lived. Just as he began to relax, a sound split the air, a low, guttural growl that set his senses on high alert. The humans froze, their expressions shifting from joy to concern. "Bear," someone whispered. The diplomat did not know what a bear was, but the human's reaction told him all he needed to know. This was a threat. His appendages tensed, instinctively preparing for defense, but before he could act, the human leader stood and gestured for everyone to stay calm. "Don't worry," the leader said, his voice steady. "We'll handle this." Handle it. The diplomat's mind raced. These creatures were fragile by comparison, their bodies ill-equipped for combat. Yet they did not flee. Instead, they moved with quiet confidence, gathering sticks and forming a barrier around the fire. The growl came again, closer this time. The diplomats' hearts pounded in unison, but the humans stood firm. One of them produced a flare, its sudden burst of light startling both the diplomat and the unseen predator. There was a moment of tense silence, and then the sound of retreating footsteps. The humans relaxed, their relief palpable. "That was close," someone muttered, and the circle reformed as if nothing had happened. The diplomat stared at them, his mind awhirl. He had expected hostility, suspicion, perhaps even fear. Instead, he had found a species capable of courage, kindness, and resilience in equal measure. As the fire crackled and the humans resumed their singing, he felt a profound shift within himself. Perhaps this mission was more than a mere diplomatic endeavor. Perhaps it was the beginning of something far greater, something neither his kind nor theirs could yet fully comprehend. And yet, one question lingered in his mind, gnawing at the edges of his newfound admiration. If this was humanity at its best, what might they be like at their worst? The diplomat couldn't sleep. Not because of fatigue, his species had long evolved beyond the need for such physical cycles, but because his thoughts churned like a maelstrom. The day's events replayed in his mind, each detail sharp and vivid. The humans' kindness, their strange rituals, their music, and even their bravery against the creature they called a bear. They defied every expectation he'd held. They weren't the barbaric, self-serving beings some in the Galactic Council had warned about. And yet, something didn't quite fit. He sat apart from the campfire now, watching the humans from a short distance. They seemed so at ease, their laughter and chatter blending with the crackle of flames and the symphony of night insects. How could a species so seemingly unguarded survive in a galaxy as perilous as this? He had witnessed countless civilizations fall due to their inability to adapt or defend themselves. Yet, humanity had thrived. There was something they weren't showing him, something beneath the surface. The leader approached quietly, his footsteps soft on the grass. "You've been quiet for a while," he said, sitting down a few feet away. He didn't crowd the diplomat, as though sensing his need for space, but his tone carried a gentle curiosity. "Is everything okay?" The diplomat turned his large, reflective eyes toward the man. "Your people surprise me," he admitted. "I anticipated caution, even hostility. But what I have encountered is quite the opposite." The leader chuckled, his breath forming faint wisps in the cool night air. "We're not so bad once you get to know us. Sure, we've had our share of conflicts, but when it comes down to it, most people just want to live their lives in peace." "Peace," the diplomat echoed. The concept was simple enough, but the execution was often elusive. "And yet, your history suggests otherwise." The leader's smile faltered slightly, a shadow crossing his face. "Yeah, well, we've made our mistakes. Big ones. But maybe that's why we try so hard now. We've seen what happens when we let fear or anger take over. We're still learning, still trying to be better." The honesty in the man's words was disarming. The diplomat considered this for a moment before posing the question that had been gnawing at him. "Why extend such generosity to me? You have no guarantee of my intentions." The leader's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "Because trust has to start somewhere. If we treated every new encounter as a threat, we'd never move forward. And, well, you're here, aren't you? That means something." Before the diplomat could respond, a voice called out from the camp. A group of humans had gathered around the young woman with the instrument, urging her to play another song. The diplomat watched as she began to strum, the melody soft and haunting. It tugged at something deep within him, a sensation he couldn't quite name. "What is the purpose of this?" he asked, gesturing toward the scene. "Music?" The leader smiled again, this time with a hint of pride. "It's how we express what words can't. Joy, sorrow, hope. It's all in there. It's a way to connect." The diplomat nodded slowly. Connection. That seemed to be a recurring theme with these humans. They sought it relentlessly, through words, gestures, even their songs. But was it genuine, or merely a fake to mask deeper intentions? He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their story than they let on. The fire began to die down, and the humans prepared to sleep, spreading blankets and settling in for the night. The diplomat remained awake, his gaze fixed on the stars above. This planet was so different from his own, its air heavier, its gravity stronger, its biosphere teeming with life in chaotic abundance. And yet, there was something undeniably captivating about it. As the camp fell silent, a subtle rustling in the nearby underbrush caught his attention. His senses sharpened instantly, his appendages tensing. He scanned the darkness, his enhanced vision piercing through the shadows. At first, he saw nothing. Then, a faint glint of light, a pair of reflective eyes. Another predator? The humans seemed oblivious, their breathing deep and even. The diplomat rose silently, moving toward the edge of the clearing. The eyes didn't retreat. They held their ground, watching him with an intelligence that sent a chill through his exoskeleton. He emitted a low-frequency signal, a precautionary measure designed to communicate non-aggression. The response came not in sound, but in movement, a figure stepping out of the shadows. It was humanoid in shape, but unlike any human he had encountered. Its form was sleek, almost metallic, with movements that were unnervingly precise. "Observer," the diplomat murmured in his native tongue. It wasn't a question. The figure tilted its head, a gesture that could have been curiosity or acknowledgement. When it spoke, its voice was a whisper, barely audible. "You are being watched." "By whom?" The figure didn't answer directly. Instead, it gestured toward the sleeping humans. "They are not as they seem." The diplomat's appendages twitched in agitation. "Explain." But the figure didn't stay. It melted back into the darkness, leaving only the rustling of leaves in its wake. The diplomat stared after it, his thoughts racing. Who or what had sent the observer? And what did it mean by its cryptic warning? He returned to the camp, his mind heavy with unanswered questions. The humans stirred as dawn approached, their faces lighting up as they greeted him. Their warmth was undiminished, but now it felt like a mask he couldn't see behind. As they packed up their belongings and prepared to lead him to their settlement, the diplomat couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a carefully constructed web. The humans were kind, yes, but were they also hiding something? And if so, what lengths would they go to keep it concealed? He followed them nonetheless, his curiosity outweighing his caution. This mission was about more than diplomacy now. It was about uncovering the truth, a truth that, he suspected, would challenge everything he thought he knew about humanity. The journey to the settlement was uneventful at first. The humans chatted among themselves, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories. The diplomat listened carefully, noting the nuances in their language and expressions. They seemed genuine, but the memory of the observer's warning lingered like a shadow. As they crested a hill, the settlement came into view. It was larger than he expected, a bustling hub of activity nestled in a valley. Structures of various shapes and sizes sprawled across the landscape, their designs both functional and aesthetically pleasing. Humans moved about with purpose, their movements efficient but unhurried. The diplomat's attention was drawn to a tall, gleaming tower at the settlement's center. It pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light that seemed almost alive. His translator struggled to decipher its purpose, feeding him fragmented data that only deepened the mystery. "What is that?" he asked, gesturing toward the tower. The leader glanced at it and smiled. "Our heart," he said simply. "It keeps everything running smoothly." The response was vague, but the diplomat sensed it was intentional. As they descended into the valley, he couldn't help but feel that the answers he sought lay within that tower. And yet, the closer they got, the more he felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him, watching his every move. For all their smiles and songs, humanity had secrets, and he was determined to uncover them. The settlement bustled with life as the diplomat followed the humans through its winding streets. Every corner revealed something new: vendors selling vibrant produce, children laughing as they chased one another, and artisans crafting tools and objects with deft hands. It was a stark contrast to the quiet clearing they had left behind. Here, humanity seemed to thrive in a way that was both chaotic and harmonious, their energy filling the air like an invisible current. Yet the diplomat's unease grew with each step. The tower at the heart of the settlement loomed closer, its rhythmic pulse a constant reminder of the unanswered questions swirling in his mind. What was its purpose? Why had the observer singled it out? The humans offered no further explanation, instead weaving through the streets with an ease that suggested they had nothing to hide. Or were they simply well practiced in concealing it? As they neared the tower, the diplomat noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere. The air grew cooler, the chatter of the settlement fading into a subdued hum. The humans around them moved with more intention, their smiles still present but somehow strained. He glanced at their faces, searching for cracks in their composure, but found none. Whatever secrets they kept, they guarded them well. The leader stopped in front of the tower's entrance, a massive archway framed by intricate carvings. "This is where we'll begin your official welcome," he said, his voice calm but carrying a weight the diplomat hadn't heard before. "It's a tradition for important visitors." The diplomat studied the structure, his keen eyes picking out details that his translator flagged as significant. The carvings depicted scenes of unity and progress, humans working together to build what appeared to be a thriving civilization. But there were other images too subtle, almost hidden, of conflict, of shadows rising behind their achievements. He felt the faint stirrings of alarm, but kept his tone measured. "What lies within?" he asked. "You'll see soon enough," the leader replied. "It's best experienced firsthand." The diplomat hesitated, his instincts urging caution. But he had come this far, and turning back now would only solidify any suspicions the humans might have about him. With a nod, he followed the leader through the archway, his appendages brushing lightly against the cool surface of the stone as he passed. The interior of the tower was unlike anything he had encountered on Earth thus far. The walls shimmered with a faint, otherworldly glow, their surfaces smooth and seamless. The air vibrated with an energy that made his carapace tingle, a sensation both unsettling and strangely invigorating. Humans moved through the space with practiced ease, their expressions neutral but their eyes watchful. The leader gestured for the diplomat to step forward. "This is our heart," he said, his voice reverent. "It's the source of our strength, our progress. Everything you've seen in the settlement exists because of what lies here." The diplomat studied the room, noting the faint hum that seemed to emanate from the center. A large cylindrical structure rose from the floor, its surface pulsing with the same rhythmic light he had seen from afar. It was clearly advanced, far beyond what the humans should have been capable of given the technological level he had observed elsewhere. "How did you construct this?" he asked, his voice careful. The leader hesitated, and for the first time, a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. "It wasn't constructed," he said finally. "It was found." The diplomat's appendages froze mid-motion. "Found?" The leader nodded. "Decades ago, deep beneath the surface. We don't know who built it, but it responded to us. It helped us. At first, we thought it was a gift, but it's more complicated than that." The diplomat felt a cold knot form in his core. "What do you mean?" The leader looked away, his gaze distant. "It gives, but it also takes. It's why we've survived, why we've thrived. But there's a cost." Before the diplomat could press further, the pulsing light intensified, bathing the room in a blinding glow. A low, resonant tone filled the air, reverberating through his very being. The humans froze, their expressions shifting to ones of fear and awe. The leader stepped back, his face pale. "It's never done this before," he said, his voice barely audible. The diplomat turned toward the cylindrical structure, his senses on high alert. The light seemed to reach for him, tendrils of energy arcing toward his form. He braced himself, his defenses activating instinctively. But the energy didn't attack. Instead, it enveloped him, probing, analyzing. He felt a flood of sensations, memories that weren't his, images of worlds and civilizations long gone. A voice echoed in his mind, not in words, but in feelings, a presence, ancient and immense. It wasn't the humans' creation. It wasn't even their ally. It was something far older, something that had been waiting. The energy released him suddenly, and he stumbled back, his appendages trembling. The humans watched him with wide eyes, their fear now mixed with confusion. The leader stepped forward cautiously. "What did it do to you?" he asked. The diplomat struggled to find words. "It scanned me. It knows who I am, what I am, and it knows why I'm here." The leader's face darkened. "And what did it find?" The diplomat didn't answer. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of information. The observer's warning, the human's strange mix of openness and secrecy, the tower's alien origin, it all pointed to something far larger than he had anticipated. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission anymore. It was a reckoning. The hum of the tower grew louder, its light shifting to a deep, ominous red. The humans began to back away, their fear palpable. The leader turned to the diplomat, his voice urgent. "You need to tell us what's happening. Now." But before he could respond, the ground beneath them shuddered violently, sending them all stumbling. A crack split the air, followed by a deafening roar. The tower's light flared once more, and the diplomat felt a surge of energy ripple outward, a force so powerful it seemed to shake the very fabric of reality. The human screamed, scrambling for cover as the tower's glow consumed the room. The diplomat stood frozen, his mind flooded with a single, terrifying realization. The tower wasn't just observing, it was awakening. The light swirled around the room like a living thing, twisting and pulsing with an intensity that made the air feel electric. The diplomat stood motionless, his senses overwhelmed. He could feel the tower's presence probing deeper, not just into his mind, but into something more fundamental, his very essence. It wasn't just awakening, it was communicating. And it wasn't speaking only to him. The humans were no longer scrambling. They were still, their faces illuminated by the blood-red glow of the tower. Their eyes were wide, but not with fear. There was something else there, an awareness, a shared understanding that the diplomat couldn't quite grasp. It was as if they were hearing a voice he couldn't. "What's happening to them?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the hum of the energy. The leader turned to him, but his expression was distant, as if he were struggling to focus. "It's calling to us," he said, his voice trembling. "We felt it before. Whispers, dreams, but never like this." The diplomat's appendages twitched in alarm. "You've known? You've known what this tower is capable of, and yet you've allowed it to remain active?" The leader shook his head, his hands clenched into fists. "We didn't understand. It's been dormant for so long. We thought we could control it." The ground beneath them shook again, more violently this time. A deep, guttural sound reverberated through the chamber, not just noise, but a vibration that seemed to resonate with the core of the planet itself. The humans staggered but didn't flee, their expressions shifting from confusion to something eerily calm. The diplomat's translator struggled to keep up as fragments of meaning poured into his mind from the tower's emanations. It was ancient, older than even the most ancient species known to the Galactic Council. It had been here long before humanity had evolved, lying dormant, waiting for something or someone to awaken it. And now, it seemed, that moment had come. Suddenly, the light shifted again, this time targeting the humans. One by one, beams of energy connected to each of them, their bodies stiffening as if caught in an invisible grip. Their expressions remained serene, but their eyes, those told a different story. There was fear there, buried beneath the surface, as if they were aware of what was happening but powerless to stop it. The diplomat felt his own body being pulled toward the center of the room. He resisted, planting his appendages firmly on the ground, but the force was unrelenting. The closer he got to the cylindrical structure, the more he felt its power surging through him. It wasn't just scanning anymore. It was merging. He cried out in his native tongue, his voice a mixture of panic and defiance. The leader, still locked in the tower's grip, managed to turn his head slightly. "You were meant to come here," he said, his voice distant but oddly certain. "It was waiting for you." The diplomat froze, the words slicing through his thoughts like a blade. "What do you mean?" he demanded, his voice sharp. But the leader didn't respond. His body went rigid, his head snapping back as the tower's energy surged into him. The other humans followed, their forms glowing with an intensity that made them almost unrecognizable. The diplomat's translator pinged frantically, feeding him fragments of data he couldn't piece together. Then, without warning, the light surrounding the humans exploded outward, filling the chamber with a blinding brilliance. The diplomat shielded his eyes, his senses overwhelmed. When the light finally subsided, he lowered his appendages cautiously, his vision adjusting to the dim glow that remained. The humans were different. Their forms were the same, but their eyes glowed faintly, the color shifting and swirling like molten metal. They moved as one, their motions fluid and synchronized. The leader stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying an eerie resonance. "It's awake," he said simply. The diplomat backed away, his instincts screaming at him to flee, but his curiosity rooted him in place. "What have you done?" he demanded. The leader tilted his head, a gesture that felt almost mechanical. "We didn't choose this. It chose us. And now it has chosen you." Before the diplomat could respond, the tower's energy surged again, this time forming a massive vortex in the center of the room. The air crackled with tension, the vibrations shaking the walls. From the vortex emerged a shape indistinct at first, but gradually solidifying. It wasn't human, nor was it like any species the diplomat had encountered. It was something else entirely. The figure spoke, its voice a deep, resonant tone that seemed to bypass hearing and go straight to the mind. "You are the bridge," it said, its gaze fixed on the diplomat. The words sent a jolt through him, his mind racing to comprehend their meaning. The humans stood motionless, their glowing eyes fixed on the figure. The diplomat felt the weight of its presence pressing down on him, demanding answers he didn't have. "What bridge?" he asked, his voice trembling. The figure didn't answer directly. Instead, it raised an appendage, if it could be called that, and pointed toward the humans. "They are the key," it said. "And you are the lock." The diplomat's mind reeled. The observer's warning, the tower's activation, the human's transformation, it was all connected. But how? And to what end? The figure's words hinted at a larger purpose, one that went far beyond diplomacy or exploration. Before he could press for answers, the figure began to dissolve, its form disintegrating into the vortex. The humans moved in unison, their glowing eyes turning toward the diplomat. The leader stepped forward again, his voice calm but carrying a chilling certainty. "You have a choice to make," he said, "but you must choose quickly. The awakening cannot be undone." The ground shook violently once more, cracks forming in the chamber walls. The diplomat could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, the stakes higher than he could have imagined. Whatever he chose, there would be no going back. The chamber groaned under the strain of the energy surging through it. The walls cracked further, bits of debris tumbling to the floor, but the humans didn't flinch. They remained eerily still, their glowing eyes locked on the diplomat. The leader's voice echoed in the charged air, steady and deliberate. "You must decide," he said again. "The tower has chosen you as the bridge. What happens next is in your hands." The diplomat felt his limbs trembling, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had been trained for negotiations, for navigating the complexities of interstellar politics, but this was beyond anything he had ever prepared for. He looked at the humans transformed, unified, alien yet unmistakably themselves, and then at the vortex still churning at the center of the chamber. The figure's words echoed in his mind. "They are the key. You are the lock. What happens if I refuse?" the diplomat asked, his voice tight. The leader's glowing eyes flickered, a hint of emotion breaking through the calm. "If you refuse, the tower will shut down, and with it, everything it has given us. Our progress, our survival, it all ends." The diplomat's translator pinged faintly, pulling fragmented data from the tower's emanations. The humans had built their entire civilization around this technology, unknowingly binding themselves to something far greater than they understood. But the data also revealed something more. The tower wasn't just sustaining them, it was tethered to them, drawing on their collective energy to awaken itself fully. If it succeeded, it wouldn't stop with this settlement or even this planet. "You don't realize what you've unleashed," the diplomat said, his voice heavy with urgency. "This isn't a gift. It's a seed, a fragment of something far more powerful. If it wakes, it won't just consume you. It will consume everything." The leader hesitated, his calm exterior cracking for the first time. "You think we don't know that?" he said, his voice rising. "We've felt it every time we've touched the tower. But without it, we are nothing. Without it, we die." The diplomat's mind raced. The humans were bound to the tower, their lives intertwined with its energy. But there had to be another way, a solution that didn't lead to annihilation. He stepped closer to the vortex, the energy pulling at him like a tide. He reached out tentatively, his appendages brushing against the edge of the swirling light. Images flooded his mind, galaxies spinning, civilizations rising and falling, and at the center of it all, the tower's creators. They had built it, not as a weapon, but as a test. A voice echoed faintly, the same deep resonance that had spoken earlier. "Only those who can transcend their fear will unlock the path. Choose wisely." The diplomat pulled back, his body trembling. He turned to the humans, his gaze steady. "This isn't about survival," he said. "It's about proving you're ready. The tower isn't your salvation, it's your challenge. And if you cling to it out of fear, you fail." The leader's glowing eyes narrowed, his body tense. "You're asking us to give up everything," he said. "To risk everything." "No," the diplomat said firmly. "I'm asking you to trust yourselves. To trust that you're more than what the tower has made you." For a moment, the chamber was silent, the hum of the energy fading into the background. The humans exchanged glances, their synchronization faltering as doubt crept in. The leader took a step forward, his glowing eyes dimming slightly. "What do we do?" The diplomat turned back to the vortex, his appendages steady despite the chaos around him. "We shut it down together. But I can't do it alone. You have to sever your connection willingly." The humans hesitated, their expressions a mix of fear and determination. The leader closed his eyes, his glowing form flickering. Slowly, He extended his hand toward the vortex, the light around him dimming further. One by one, the other humans followed, their movements deliberate. The room began to quake, the tower's energy surging wildly as if resisting their choice. The diplomat reached out, his appendages intertwining with the human's energy. Together, they pushed against the vortex, their combined will forming a barrier against the tower's power. The light grew brighter, the hum rising to a deafening roar. The vortex twisted violently, collapsing in on itself as the tower's energy began to dissipate. Then, with a final, shuddering pulse, the light vanished. The chamber fell silent, the air still and heavy. The humans stumbled, their glowing eyes fading to normal. The leader sank to his knees, his face pale but resolute. "Is it over?" he asked. The diplomat scanned the room, his senses reaching for any lingering energy. The tower was quiet, its once pulsing surface now dark and inert. But something tugged at his awareness, a faint signal, distant but unmistakable. The tower's creators had taken notice. This was only the beginning. "It's over for now," the diplomat said, his voice low. "But this was just the first step. You've proven your strength, but you'll need to prove it again." The humans looked at him, their faces a mixture of relief and apprehension. The leader nodded, his expression hardening. As the diplomat stepped out of the chamber, the first rays of dawn illuminated the settlement. The humans' resilience had saved them for now. But as he looked up at the sky, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The dawn stretched across the horizon, casting long shadows over the settlement as the humans slowly emerged from the chamber, their steps hesitant but unified. The air outside felt different, now lighter, quieter, as if the planet itself was exhaling after holding its breath for millennia. The diplomat paused at the edge of the clearing, turning back to look at the now silent tower. Its once ominous presence had dulled, the dark surface blending into the rocky terrain. Yet, he could still feel the faint echo of its existence, like a whisper on the edge of his consciousness. The humans gathered around their leader, who leaned heavily on one of his companions. The glow in their eyes had completely vanished, replaced by a mixture of exhaustion and determination. They looked at the diplomat with an expression he hadn't seen before: trust. It was a stark contrast to their initial hostility, and it carried a weight that the diplomat wasn't entirely sure he could bear. "What happens now?" one of them asked, breaking the silence. The diplomat considered the question carefully. He had spent his life navigating situations like this, bringing species together, resolving disputes, preventing conflicts. But this was different. This wasn't just about survival or diplomacy. This was about identity, about a species discovering what it truly meant to be itself. "Now you rebuild," he said, his voice steady. "Without the tower's influence, you'll have to find your own way. It won't be easy, but you've already proven you're capable of more than you realize." The leader nodded slowly, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. "And the tower? What if it wakes up again?" The diplomat glanced back at the structure, his senses brushing against its dormant energy. "It won't," he said, though he wasn't entirely sure he believed it. "Not unless you try to reawaken it. And after today, I think you understand the risks." The humans exchanged uneasy glances, but didn't argue. They knew the truth as well as he did. The tower was a relic of a time long past, a test left behind by a civilization so advanced that its motives were almost incomprehensible. But it was also a mirror, reflecting the choices of those who encountered it. The humans had passed this time, But the test had left its mark. Over the following days, the settlement began to stir with new life. Without the tower's energy, the humans had to adapt quickly, reconfiguring their systems and rediscovering old technologies that had been abandoned in favor of the tower's gifts. It was slow, grueling work, but it brought them together in ways they hadn't anticipated. The unity they had felt in the chamber didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger, reinforced by the shared experience of what they had overcome. The diplomat stayed to help where he could, offering guidance and insight from his years of experience with other species. But he knew his role was temporary. This was their journey, and he couldn't walk it for them. As the days turned into weeks, he found himself reflecting on his own purpose. The events with the tower had shaken him deeply, challenging his understanding of the universe and his place within it. For all his training and knowledge, he had come dangerously close to failing the test himself. The thought lingered in his mind, a humbling reminder of his own limitations. One evening, as the settlement quieted under the soft glow of the planet's moons, the leader approached him. The man's face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes held a clarity that hadn't been there before. He sat beside the diplomat, the silence between them comfortable. "We owe you more than we can say," the leader began, his voice low. "Without you, we wouldn't have made it." The diplomat inclined his head, his gaze fixed on the distant tower. "You would have," he said simply. "You just needed to see what you were capable of." The leader nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And what about you? Will you tell your people what you found here?" The question caught the diplomat off guard. He had already considered the report he would file with the Galactic Council. The tower's existence, the human's transformation, the ancient test. It was the kind of discovery that could reshape the Council's understanding of the universe. But it was also dangerous. If word of the tower spread, there was no telling what other species might do to claim it for themselves. "No," he said finally. "Not yet. This is your story to tell when you're ready." The leader seemed surprised but didn't argue. He looked out at the settlement, the faint sounds of work still carrying through the night air. "We'll take care of it," he said. "The tower, the settlement, each other. We'll make sure what happened here means something." The diplomat stayed a few more days, long enough to see the first signs of real progress. Then, with little fanfare, he prepared to leave. The humans gathered to see him off, their gratitude evident in their words and gestures. The leader clasped his arm in a gesture of respect, his grip firm. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." The diplomat inclined his head, his appendages folding in a gesture of farewell. "Take care of each other," he said. "And remember, your strength lies in what you choose to build, not in what you inherit." As his ship lifted off, the diplomat watched the settlement shrink below him. The tower stood silent, a shadow against the rugged landscape. He felt a pang of uncertainty, wondering if he had made the right choice in leaving it to the humans. But as the settlement faded from view, he reminded himself that this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. In the quiet of his ship, as he set course for the next sector, the diplomat allowed himself a moment of reflection. The tower's creators had left their test behind as a challenge, but perhaps it was more than that. Perhaps it was a reminder that even in the vastness of the universe, with all its mysteries and dangers, the greatest strength came from within. The humans had learned that lesson, and so had he. And somewhere, deep in the silent corridors of the tower, a faint light flickered, waiting for the next chapter to begin.